In this video, we cover two very interesting and very important ideas. First of all, we try to understand the link between total revenue and elasticity. And once we know that, we will see how the knowledge of elasticity and its link with total revenue, how can this be used by businesses to devise their pricing policy. And as we go along doing all of this, we will sort of recap and bring together all the different ideas about PED that we have discussed so far. So that's the plan, and let us start by first of all looking into what exactly is total revenue. Now to see that, let's just create a very simple imaginary scenario. Let's assume there is a shop and that shop sells apples and the price of each apple is 5 rupees. Let us also assume that currently there are 10 people who come to this shop to buy apples, and each one of them buys a single apple, so 1 apple per person. That is, the quantity demanded is equal to 10. Now, what is the total amount of money that flows into this business? That is simply the price of every apple multiplied by the total number of apples that are being demanded. So a quantity demanded of 10 multiplied by the price of 5. So 50 rupees, that's the amount of money that flows into this business. And total revenue, exactly the same thing. The price of the product multiplied by the total quantity demanded is equal to your total revenue, the total amount of money that flows into a business. That is simply what your total revenue is. Now, one small minor thing that you need to know here is that, you see, if 50 rupees is the total amount of money that is flowing into this business, then 50 rupees is also the amount of money that is being spent by the consumer on this product. So the total expenditure done by the consumer is the total revenue that is received by the producer. So sometimes in the exams, just to confuse you, the examiner will just use this terminology of total expenditure instead of total revenue. So don't be confused. We will do all the analysis by referring to total revenue, and if in the exams you see the word total expenditure, it means exactly the same thing. Now with that in mind, let us continue to build this imaginary scenario, and while we do that, we will cover all the details that we need to know. So let's assume that this shopkeeper now wants to increase the amount of total revenue that is coming into the business, and he thinks about increasing the price. Now, whether that will lead to an increase in total revenue depends. It depends on the number of customers that will stop buying apples, because there is always this danger that if you increase the price, make the product more expensive, you might even lose your existing customers. If that happens, total revenue, instead of increasing, it will decrease. So what about a discount? What about a decrease in price? Now, if you decrease the price, then each of your existing customer will pay you a lesser price, so total revenue should come down. But on the other hand, there is also the possibility that maybe a lot of other additional customers will now come to your shop to buy apples. If that happens, the total revenue might increase. So again, maybe or maybe not. So there is a problem, there is a confusion here. Should the shopkeeper increase the price or decrease the price if his aim is to increase the amount of total revenue? And this is where price elasticity of demand can help. How? That is the aim of this video. That is what we want to understand. How knowing the elasticity of demand can tell us whether price should be increased or decreased. Now, to understand that, let us continue to make some more assumptions, and first of all assume that this product's demand is elastic. Now that is something that we know, but let's say that the shopkeeper, he doesn't know any economics. So he doesn't care about or know about elasticity and all these things. All he's trying to do still is that he wants to increase his total revenue, and let's assume that he decides to try both of the possibilities. And first of all, he decides to maybe increase the price and see what happens. Now, what will happen if you increase the price of an elastic product? What will happen to the total revenue? Total revenue, remember, is again simply your price times the quantity demanded. Now, if you increase the price and demand is elastic, then quantity demanded will fall. That is what law of demand tells us. But elastic demand tells us that it will fall a lot. At least it will fall by a larger percentage than the change in price, and therefore the total revenue will fall. So price increase won't work in case of elastic demand. It won't work in terms of letting you increase your total revenue. So what about a price decrease? Now again, total revenue is equal to price into quantity demanded. Now this time, if you reduce or lower the price, give a little bit of discount, and if your demand is elastic, then law of demand tells us quantity will increase, and elastic demand tells us that it will increase a lot. So therefore, if you give a discount, you will be able to attract so many more customers, increase the quantity demanded so much that now you will earn a higher total revenue. So in case of elastic demand, therefore, if you want to increase total revenue, you must lower the price. Now, what if the demand for the product is inelastic? Should we still lower the price to increase total revenue? Now, to understand and develop that part of the story, let us continue with the example. And let us assume that there is another shop down the road which is selling a product with inelastic demand. Now again, this shopkeeper doesn't know any economics, so he doesn't care about any elasticity or inelasticity. All he sees is that this guy next door has given a discount, lowered the price, and he ends up making a higher total revenue. So he tries to imitate him and lowers the price. Now, if the price is decreased in case of inelastic demand, then your total revenue, which is again price into quantity demanded, as price falls, the quantity demanded will respond and increase because that's the law of demand, but it will not respond a lot. It's an inelastic demand, not a responsive demand. And therefore, if anything, the total revenue will fall. So what you should do to increase total revenue in case of inelastic demand is to increase the price. Why? Because remember, inelastic demand means that the consumer is not very responsive. His hands are tied. So the consumer is not going to run away anywhere. So increase the price. The quantity demanded, it will fall. That's the law of demand, but it will just fall a little bit. It will not be very responsive. And therefore, your total revenue will increase. So what does all of this mean for the pricing policy a business can use if it wants to maximize total revenue? Now the pricing policy is very straightforward. All the firm needs to do is to first of all identify whether the product's demand is elastic or inelastic. And if the demand is elastic, like the case on the left, then lower the price, give a discount. And if the demand is inelastic, like the case on the right, then increase the price. Now, please make sure that you see the logic behind this whole pricing policy instead of trying to memorize it. And that's not useful, and that's not the way economics is supposed to be studied. It's a conceptual subject. And the logic here is very simple. Elastic demand means responsive demand. Consumer is touchy. He will respond a lot to whatever you do to price. So never increase the price. The consumer will run away. He will respond by reducing the quantity demanded a lot. So what do? Give them a discount. Try to attract them, and a lot of them will be attracted because your demand is elastic, responsive. And in case of inelastic demand, all we are saying is consumer is not responsive. He cannot, or he doesn't want to switch away from the product no matter what you do to price. He will not respond to price changes a lot. So increase the price. Quantity demanded may fall just a little bit, but it will never fall a lot because demand is inelastic, not responsive. So that is all we are talking about here, something based on very simple logic. And now with these very simple concepts, we can very quickly work out what the pricing policy should be if your demand this time is unitary elastic. Now, in case of unitary elastic demand, remember total revenue is again price into quantity demanded. Now, if you try to reduce the price, then quantity demanded will this time increase by exactly the same percentage. That is what unitary elasticity implies. The percentage change of quantity is equal to the percentage change of price. So the price and quantity effect will cancel out each other, and therefore total revenue will not change. And similarly, if you increase the price in an attempt to increase total revenue, the fall in quantity will be exact same percentage. So again, total revenue will be constant. It will not change. So simply remember that if your demand of the product is unitary elastic, then total revenue is going to be constant. It is not going to change as you change prices. Now, let us wrap this entire discussion up by asking ourselves whether in reality do firms and do shops, do they really think in terms of elastic and inelastic demand and then devise their pricing policy? Now, to see that, let's go back to our old friend khadi. Now, the demand for khadi's clothes, remember, khadi's clothes have a lot of substitutes and they are not a necessity. So demand for khadi's clothes is most likely to be elastic, PED of greater than 1, and the demand curve therefore would be relatively flat. That is what we know from previous sections. Now, in terms of pricing policy, our theory here is predicting that if demand is elastic, then you should lower the price to increase your total revenue. Does khadi often lower its price? Yes, in fact it does. Khadi would usually give you a couple of sales every year. So this is exactly what they are doing. Looking at this elastic price, they give you a little bit of discount and then you run to the shop like crazy. There is a long queue and all the stock is gone suddenly. Quantity demanded responds a lot and khadi ends up earning a larger total revenue. And now consider Vabda. Now Vabda is the only supplier of electricity. And electricity is pretty much a necessity in modern times. So there are no substitutes and we are talking about a necessity. So demand for Vabda's electricity is very likely to be inelastic, PED of less than 1, and demand curve therefore which is very steep. Now in terms of pricing policy, our theory is predicting that if demand for the product is inelastic, then you should increase the price to maximize total revenue. Does Vabda increases its price? Well, unfortunately, we all know and we all suffer from the frequent price hikes of Vabda. So our theory is in fact matching with reality here, for once at least in economics.